What's up, YouTube? I'm Monty, and today we're going to talk about part 2 of what goes into making a Runeterran champion. If you haven't seen part 1 of this video, you should do so by clicking wherever I put this bubble. But without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to try and keep this one a bit shorter and more to the point than the last one. I know it was a bit rambly. I don't, unfortunately, have a PowerPoint, but that's okay because the client is going to do just what we wanted to do for this one. So last time we talked about the progression of Runeterran champions and their design from Jhin through Varus. We can see all of our Runeterran champions here. They are very, very cool. And like I said, I have a whole video on it as well as an article coming out that you can either read through or watch to catch yourself up before we get into this one. But yeah, there was a very clear progress, right? Jhin started with a very streamlined idea. He was his own region. His region only included his skill stuff. There was no spells. His champion spell was limited in power, but also still quite powerful in other ways, and it worked towards his win condition. And we really identified that Riot wants their Runeterran champions to work in a certain way, right? From Jhin, we moved on to the others, and we talked about all of them. Today, we're going to talk about the last two Runeterran champions, aatrox, who we have up in front of us, and Ryze. We'll get to him in a bit, though. So, let's start with aatrox and his Runeterran ability. His origin ability here is the World Ender. You can put any non-champion Darkin into your deck during deck building. Once you've played or summoned 3 different other Darkin, draw an aatrox. So, aatrox will not draw himself. He doesn't count for his own play effect, but that's okay because we have all these lovely Darkin to choose from. And note it says non-champion because the 2 cultist champions, Varus and Kayn, are Darkin themselves, but they can't be put into aatrox's region. They're not included in his region, and I think that is a very, very smart limiting power. So, aatrox's region is obviously very limited. You only have access to these Darkin. Now, that was clearly a design factor, right? They wanted it to be this way because they want aatrox to be forced into dipping into other regions to get his power and support the rest of his, fill out his kit, right? Let's support the rest of his deck build. If he had access to other spells or equipments outside of these, he just wouldn't have any reason. You can't give him a toolbox region the same way you gave the cultist a toolbox region, because then he doesn't need to go anywhere else. He can have mono aatrox, and they really didn't want mono aatrox existing. But because he has such a limited region, right? We're allowed to put a lot of power into the card itself. Like, look at his ability here, right? On play, he's healing you 2. On strike, he's healing you 2. He's creating a World Ender, which is now 16, just nerfed 2 days ago. And World Ender reads, reduce my cost by 1 for each time an equipped or Darkin ally has struck this game. And then assimilate equipped allies with Darkins. And if we hover this, we can see assimilate means transform allies equipped with Darkin equipment into their Darkin unit forms. If they are champions, they level up. So this means that anything... We'll take a look at the cultist region really quickly here, because this is the best example of what I'm going to talk to you guys about. If we look at Ranger Knight, see how Ranger Knight here gains, once you've equipped an ally, grant me Scout, it gains Scout post-play. That Scout keyword is going to be transferred onto any unit that it transforms into. So if you equip one of these Ranger Knight defectors with any one of these Darkin, let's say Naganeka of Zareta, for whatever reason, this is the first one I saw, this is now going to have Scout. So that lets aatrox do some very, very powerful things that he would otherwise not be able to do. And again, a lot of his power budget is put directly into the card. To level up, you need to play the World Ender, and once you play the World Ender, because of the play cast changes, he immediately levels up. And again, he auto-equips the Darkin Blade, which is just +1/+1 in regen. Very powerful weapon. Regen is quietly a very strong keyword, especially when you have big units like these Darkin. But once he's leveled up, allied Darkin cost 5 less. This means that all of these 8 cost Darkin, or 7 cost in the case of Zolani, the unit, and 9 cost in the case of Ibaros, are now cheaper, right? Draw you can play for free. Pra is a little bit more expensive still as well. He's also 9, or it's also 9. I'm not sure. I'm not going to try and identify its gender. But because of how limited this region pool is and how he doesn't have any tools of his own, they were able to distribute a lot of his power budget into his kit, right? Into the card itself. This is weak. This is strong. right? And then even if we look at his champion spell, Aatrox's champion spell does more Aatrox things. It's Deathbringer Sweep. This is his signature Q ability from League of Legends. And not to mention, all the healing is very, very significant. It's a good, large portion of the kit in League of Legends, so it's very interesting that they've transferred it this way. But Deathbringer Sweep is Aatrox and an enemy strike each other, create a Deathbringer Slash in your hand. Deathbringer Slash, Aatrox and an enemy strike each other, create a Deathbringer's Descent in hand. Aatrox and an enemy strike each other. These two are fleeting, which makes sense. You can't just give him infinite strike spells when he's healing so much. Good design there. Good way to limit him. But as far as his decks go, we've seen Aatrox spawn a couple decks. The best one, I think, even post-nerfs, in my opinion, is still Vayne Aatrox, which seeks to utilize Tumble alongside all of these low-cost weapons. Very, very clearly designed to work together. And just, it abuses the board tempo that it gets by taking positive trades through the use of Quick Attack on the Harp alongside challengers, Tough on the Aegis alongside challengers, or just buffs off of the spear, now that we've seen the Aegis nerfed a little bit as well. Outside of the Demacia deck, we've also seen Aatrox be placed into Shadow Isles to gain access to its very aggressive early game package with stuff like Cursed Keeper and all of these good things. Ravenous Butcher makes a lot of sense. Hapless just has multiple units. And then there's Wings in the Wave here as well, being able to spawn out 2 first waves, or first wave and a prey alongside. Just gives you lots and lots of targets to stick your equipment onto. So there's a lot of stuff in that region. And then beyond that, we have seen Kayn Aatrox, which in my opinion is still the weakest, especially since the deck has been nerfed twice, and I just think the Cultist cards are a little bit subpar at this point. It does give you a lot of options, and it can have its place in the metagame, but I'm not very high on the deck myself. And then the final deck that we've seen Aatrox paired with is sometimes Shurima. So we gain access to Akshan and his landmarks. If you haven't seen this happen already, Akshan works very, very efficiently with weapons because you can just cycle them. You can just put one on him and then swap it off and then put another one on and just keep doing that, and his landmarks count down very, very quickly. So as far as the flavor goes, Riot crushed it. Right, Aatrox is like a very good translation of his League of Legends kit. He does a lot of powerful things in a similar way. Like, this is his Q ability. You can't argue. Like, it is, right? Like, you see the same effects. It feels that way. The art is fantastic. You get the multiple slashes. They cost less and less each time, and you're getting healing for all of it, which is fantastic. World Ender is his ultimate ability. It's a huge effect. Aatrox becomes virtually unkillable during it. Well, he doesn't become virtually unkillable, but he does become a 10-10, which is effectively the same thing in Legends of Runeterra. And then he lets you just spam out these Darken units and create this hugely powerful board that almost nothing can contest with. So I think Aatrox has still not been nerfed enough, if you ask me. I could be wrong about this. It is still only a couple days after the patch. We're not 100% sure what's good, what's not. But in my opinion, I think the healing on play still needs to be removed. I think that's just a little bit too much power on the card still, and this maybe needs to change to 4. Debatable, of course. We can go back and forth on it, but the other thing you could do, you could remove some of the stats off of the Darkened Blade, and you can also just, I suppose you could work some weird wording into it where the Darkened Blade can only be equipped onto specific units like other Darken. Because part of the reason why he's so strong is that you can actually place a different piece of equipment onto Aatrox, getting the Darkened Blade in hand, letting you play it on a different unit, so when you cast World Ender, you have 2 Aatrox on the field. Suddenly all your Darken are free. It's kind of absurd, and it is interruptible. Unlike Aatrox himself, the Darkened Blade won't transform into a level 2 Aatrox unless the spell completes or the unit survives. So it's interruptible, but because of the nature of this World Ender counting down constantly, you can realistically get it to 2 or 3 mana if you want to play that slowly. And then once you've played it that way, you're more than, like, you're choking your opponent and forcing them into weird, awkward lines, and it gives you breathing room. As far as these Darken go, some are better than the others. We've seen these. They've been in the game for a while right now. Darken Bloodletter is obviously some of the strongest. Solani herself, just recurring value is insane, and not to mention the fact that she gives you a Dark Enthrall with every time the unit that these are on are slain. Tarosh, huge game-ending play if you can get there. Aatrox helps you get there a lot sooner. Ballcucks, funny name. This is like a decent weapon. I think it's been a little bit underplayed, but Ballcucks himself can be quite strong once he's ramped up. The Darken Aegis was so good we saw it nerfed. It lost a point of attack in the most recent patch. Jaral, incredibly strong. Love the flavor of this guy. Love how powerful he is and just how he can stonewall some turns. Pra is another one that I think has been a little bit underplayed. I do think that this Darken is quite strong. I just think that people overlooked it because the others were better, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. When better cards shine, you're going to play them, right? Siratu, this is, in my opinion, probably the strongest Darken. Drawing 2 and reducing it by 2 is just insane. When you can cheat this out alongside the World Ender, it's wild, wildly powerful. Then we have Iberos. Iberos is a little bit weak, but the Darken Harpoon itself is another one that I think is quite strong. Unfortunately, it just didn't quite fit into any decks that people have thought up, but we may see that change in the future. I'm sure this will find a home one day. A little bit of a bug there. That was a tooltip. They were going to buff Iberos, but then decided not to, and they never pulled the text change, so ignore that. He is 9 mana at this point in time. Harazi right here. Support, grow my supported allies stats to mine, give it my positive keywords this round. This is nuts. This card is super strong. These are 2 separate effects, just so you know. This grow is permanent. It doesn't go back at the end of the round. The positive keywords are only for this round. But still, very, very powerful effect. Very, very cool. The Darkened Spear, we have Anaka over here. Attack, grant the top 2 allies in your deck +1/+1. You may spend 8 mana to play me as Anaka. Anaka over here is from the top 6 cards of your deck, summon an attacking follower or non-champion Darken and grant it +1/+1. I have seen some crazy stuff. Actually, just earlier today in Aegis, we saw Anaka summon Siratu, which also did its attack effect. Absolutely wild chains. This is by far one of the strongest Darken, and a very, very cool one. I think it's great. I think it gives Freljord a little bit of a buff. Unfortunately, not quite enough of a buff to put Freljord back into the spotlight, but still, super powerful card, super fun card. And then Zalani, I've seen so many people try to make this work, but nobody's quite found the right blend for it. I don't know myself. I tried it in Nightfall. I thought it was okay there. This will find a home one day. It's a crazy powerful effect. Just a matter of where and when. But it'll happen. So let's compare aatrox a little bit to some of the other Runeterrans, right? If we just go back over here, we can see all the Runeterran champions. We talked, again, Jhin, very similar, right? Can only put skill units into the deck, and like that is part of his limiting factor. Again, very arguably overpowered on the card effect itself. Then we had Bard. Bard, the opposite. Very wide region. Well, narrow region, but wide origin ability. Lots of power placed into the origin ability, as opposed to the card itself. Bard himself, rather weak unit, 2/5. Doesn't do a whole lot, but still good. And then Evelyn, again, a little bit of a wider region. We started to touch on this idea of a toolbox region, a region that actually helps the Runeterran champion fulfill its support role and do its powerful things, but didn't quite hit the mark. Then finally we got into Jax. Much wider region. Has a region that is designed to give him everything that he could possibly want to live out his power fantasies. And anything that he, like, further protection is kind of the only thing that the Jax region is missing, but that's a limiting factor of Jax, right? That's a way to make him dip into a secondary region to gain some power that way. Then we have Varus and Kayn, who we talked about quite at length in the last video. The cultist region is what I would define a toolbox region as, and what I mean by that is that it has access to all sorts of different cards. In my opinion, the cards are a little bit lower power level at this point than their generic versions in a specific region, like the strike spell in the cultist region is just weaker than any other strike spell in the game because it's limited to the fact that you have to have an equipped unit to use it. Now, is that necessarily a drawback in the deck you're playing it with? Not usually, but still it can be. And we've seen it struggle. We've seen players struggle to be able to use it effectively because they are limited to the fact that you have to have an equipped unit. But again, these are all intelligent design choices. So going back to aatrox here, they've done much of the same thing, right? They've limited his region to this so they could put power into the card itself and force him to invest into a secondary region to gain power back. typically, we're just going to look at an aatrox deck so we have an idea of what it looks like right now. As you guys can see here, we have a little bit of protection from the catch. We have some challenger units, some scouts, and this is very much Vayne abuse still, right? Vayne with her tumble, we talked a little bit about it earlier. Tumble is equip an ally with an equipment in hand that costs 2 or less. It starts a free attack. As you can imagine, with level 2 aatrox, that's a little bit absurd. With any of these darken, it's a little bit absurd. So we see strike spells coming out here. We see protection spells coming out here. And this region is providing aatrox a way to get on the board and make use of his overbearing stats. I guess I'm kind of hiding some of this stuff here, but that's okay. Now, Ryze is kind of the polar opposite. Ryze is a little bit of the polar opposite of aatrox. Rather than having a very defined region, his region is very undefined. The Rune Mage allows you to put any non-targeted burst and focus speed spells into your deck. At the start of the game, you're going to create 2 Delve into the Past for each Ryze that began in your deck. Delve into the Past is a 2-mana burst speed spell. Choose one of 2 world runes you don't have in play or in hand and create it in hand, if you can't draw one. So this secondary portion is really never going to matter because, well, even the primary portion is really never going to matter because Ryze is a champion that was designed to be used with his region. They gave him a very cool alternate win condition through these world runes and his level 2 ability. He levels up when he sees 3 unique world runes, and then when he levels up, he gains Spell Shield, becomes a 4/6, and when he attacks, he does a Thanos snap and destroys the enemy nexus. It's really cool. You're never going to see it because the world runes are bad, and if you're playing Ryze, it's simply so you can add all these burst and focus seed spells into your deck. It gives you access to all the Tellstones, for example, which is like huge. Getting all the Tellstones in your region, that lets you do so many different things. It's just very, very cool and allows for a lot of creative deck building opportunities. But if we just want to take a look at these world runes here, Shard of Violence, when I'm played, if I'm unique, activate all your other world runes. This is the case for every world rune, and that's because they is such a heavy investment cost up front. You have to pay the 2 for the Delve in the Past, and then you have to pay 2 for the rune itself. So you're paying 4 mana to draw 1 card and put this on the board and take away your board space so you can't defend as much. You might be starting to see why this is not such a good card. Shard of Betrayal, when I played, if I'm unique, I'm going to ignore reading that. When I played or activated, deal 2 to the weakest enemy. This one's actually pretty good. Dealing 4 mana for 2 is like not great, but if you can get value out of this twice, either one of these, if you can get value out of them twice, is like fine. Shard of Reverence, when I played or activated, refill 2 spell mana. Again, you're paying 4 mana to get 2 back. Woohoo! Great. Shard of Hope, when I played or activated, healed allies, Ryzes, and your Nexus 2. Now this one you can heal 4 for 4, which is kind of on rate. It's not the worst thing in the world, but still, it's a little icky. And then Shard of Madness. When I played or activated, create a Rune Prison in hand, or if you have one, reduce its cost by 1. And a Rune Prison is just stun an attacking enemy. So, how does this fit in flavor-wise? Well, the skill off of this is very much reminiscent of Ryze's Q ability in League of Legends. Fantastic. Rune Prison is Ryze's spell. That is what Ryze is known for. That's why Ryze is often picked in pro play, because he has the ability to just chain lock people with this Rune Prison. So, lots of flavor on these two. Very, very cool. I think these ones are great. I think the mana one touches his flavor point super well as well, and the draw one as well. So if you don't know, Ryze in League of Legends is very focused around his mana. He gains ability power, which is how he deals damage. Through his mana, his spells also scale up off of his mana. So very centered around mana, and the fact that he gives you mana back repeatedly is cool and very flavorful, and it fits in with his League of Legends theme. Same thing with the draw. A big portion of Ryze's kit is that he's able to refund his cooldowns. So we don't really have cooldowns in LOR, not just yet anyways. There may one day be a landmark that we can click on and it'll refresh itself in a turn or two, like a reverse countdown style thing. I think that would be a cool design, but we don't have that yet. So the closest thing to a cooldown is your hand, right? You're limited by how many cards you can play. Well, he gives you more cards. So again, I think they did a good job of fitting Ryze's League of Legends flavor into the card through these world runes. And I also think it's a good thing that these aren't super playable and like he's not going to be winning the game consistently with these, because I think it would be very, very toxic if he did. The thing with alternate win conditions is that while they're cool and fun, they're also frustrating to play against, especially when they're uncounterable and high tier. So Ryze, very cool, but also incredibly base that they limited his design and his power level to his region itself. The one thing we haven't talked about yet is Ryze's Realm Warp. Now, I'm a little bit torn about this one, because on one hand, I do think it's a pretty cool spell. I think it's interesting. On the other hand, it kind of misses the flavor of his ultimate in League of Legends. So in League of Legends, Ryze throws down this pool, and if you stand in it, friend or enemy or neutral minion, you get sent to a different part of the map once its channeling gets completed. He's discarding followers. So it, like, the draw to discard, it's just a miss in my opinion, right? Like, I would, if you threw any followers drawn somewhere else onto the top 3 cards of your deck afterwards, or into the bottom of your deck, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I get it, but I don't know. I think like the big portion of Ryze's ultimate in League of Legends is transporting your whole team in behind the enemies or a portion of your team. So there's like play there, right? There's an effect that you're messing with the board state, and this kind of misses that altogether. It is a powerful card though, especially given that Ryze's region is all these spells. He's often going to have a deck composed primarily of spells. So you're not really getting the drawback off of this. 3 mana for draw 3 is completely unheard of in this game. The only time we've seen anything remotely close to that is pick a card. And pick a card, you have to kick a card back from your hand. So you're going -2 to go +1, or you were, and it costed 3 mana, and the cards drawn are fleeting. It's since been nerfed. It's now 2 for 2, which is fair. It's just a turn spell now instead of card advantage. But you know, it goes to show that this is a powerful card draw effect, and it is very flavorful alongside Ryze and helps him fulfill his win condition because, well, you're putting delves into the past into your deck, and that's how you're getting access to these landmarks. So let's talk a little bit about the region itself. It gives you a little bit of everything, which is cool, right? You can kind of cheat the no target thing through things like Spell Thief and Trinket Trade, and all of the Tellstones, of course, some of them have targeted spells, right? Oh, these are all targeted spells. But because the Tellstones themselves are not targeted, you're allowed to put them into your deck anyways. I think that's great. I think this is fantastic. I think it's good that they give you reasonable ways to break the rules of his region without it feeling too overpowered. Something like Gifts from Beyond, again, lets you cheat this, can't be targeted because it's a non-targeted burst spell. You can do all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of different things in this. Formal Invitation, a very cool card that I think has been a little bit under-experimented with. I like that he brings the discard regions outside of the discard regions, so you can play something like Bandle City Mecha Yordles with Ryze using Visions and other discard cards here. Just type in discard and see what comes up. We have Jury Rig and Stress Testing, so he gives you both the discard payoff cards from the 2 different regions in his own region. Gives you access to stuff like Tempting Prospect, which can let you build a combo deck. It's just very versatile champion. And the one thing he's really, really good at is drawing. Look at all this card draw that he has access to. Ryze has access to every card draw card in the game, I think, except for Pick a Card, which isn't a card draw card, as we just identified, right? Even Ritual of Renewal. You get Ritual of Renewal through Ionian Tellstone. It's incredible, isn't it? So if we look at this, what is Ryze doing for us? Well, we've talked about why his win condition is problematic and you won't often be seeing it very often. So what does a Ryze deck look like then? I'll show you. I will show you. I have Alan ZQ's Ryze list here somewhere. There it is. There's only one Ryze, Monty. Yeah, that's right. I actually predicted this when I first saw Ryze. I didn't think Ryze would be played for anything other than his region. Unfortunately, his region ended up being a little bit more limited than I expected. Um, but still, we gain access to lots of different cards, and he enables some fun stuff. Like, this is very much an assembly bot bar deck, Seraphine bar, assembly bots, and Victor, of course. And it's a very cool deck. Like, it's a lot of fun. It turns this card, which is basically never seen play in the history of the game, into something that's very, very powerful and lets you win games all on its own. Of course, it is Victor synergistic with the Victors as well. And actually, now that Seraphine's been nerfed and Bar's been nerfed, we may want to switch this to 3 Victors to Sarah. But he lets you do some very creative things with your deck building options. Also has access to On-Treat, which is cute. And you can use even the Delves into Past as just discard fodder, right? So Ryze gives you access to a lot of different things, a lot of very cool things, and his design was very intelligently limited because if it wasn't, it would very quickly become quite toxic. So, while Riot did a fantastic job of designing and limiting Ryze's power level, and not necessarily the same is true with aatrox, he's limited quite intelligently, but his power level might still be too high even after a nerf, we can see how Runeterrans have progressed, right? There's been a clear evolution on what their regions should look like from the start till now. Even Jhin to aatrox are very, very different, right? With Jhin, even though his region is super limited, and it is still primarily skill units only. I'm losing my tongue here. Whereas aatrox is equipment only. The equipment provides value in ways that the skill units do not. Skill units are almost exclusively used to deal damage to the face. That's just the way they've been designed thus far, and there's no reason that can't change in the future of the game, but to date, that's kind of where they're at. Whereas aatrox was given power in his equipment. All of the equipment provides you a keyword of some sort. They give you additional stats. There's just more to them than a skill unit. So we saw a clear development, like, okay, Jhin was strong and he had a lot of power both in his origin ability through the Lotus Traps and everything, and through his kit itself with his Curtain Call. But aatrox, we took some of that power out of the origin ability. Yes, he tutors himself with his, which is arguably incredibly powerful. Not arguably, it is incredibly powerful, especially since he gives you access to a strike spell when double drawn. 3 strike spells. But that's it. That's all he's doing for his origin ability. The power is still in his region through the keywords and benefits that the equipment provide your other units, as well as in the card itself. We looked at aatrox, he's so powerful. Ryze, on the other hand, has a very complicated card, very complicated origin ability, but none of that really matters because it's gated behind such a mana block that you're never really actually playing him for that ability, which, again, I think is fantastic, smart, and like very well done, because while it's cool that the alternate win condition exists and can be used to win the game occasionally, and like sometimes you can pull it off, like that's great, it's got to require a lot of investment, otherwise it just won't be fun for your opponent. So I think that's super well done. Now, the question comes, who is next for Runeterrans, right? We've gotten all of these guys. So where do we go next? I think one of the biggest things that people expect is the Poro King. Now, who is the Poro King? The Poro King is the king of the Poros, my guy. This is him. He exists in League of Legends already. He's in a couple custom game modes, and he loves his Poro snacks. Look at him. Look at that stash. What a gamer. So I think my current theory for the next Runeterran champion is the Poro King, and I believe this has been backed up by the Skilled Roy and his data mines. He has found some indication that the Poro King is coming to Legends of Runeterra. This would make Legends of Runeterra's second exclusive champion, Nora being the first, something that is very cool that we get. I love that they're doing this. I think it's great for the game's universe and for the flavor of the game, and I think it sets an excellent precedent for the future. What will the Poro King do? Well, obviously the Poro King is going to let you put any Poros into your deck, right? That's got to be it. I imagine that they'll be giving things like Poro Snacks and Aurora Borealis the Poro tag, the same way Weapon Master spells have the Weapon Master tag. In anticipation of this, we may even see that roll out in the next patch or two, because we should be seeing an expansion early February, if I remember correctly, alongside the rotation. But beyond things that are semi-confirmed through data mines and whatnot, who else could be a Runeterran champion? Well, we can start by going to universe.league of legends. That's not what I wanted. We'll go to champions once it loads. And we're going to sort by region here. And we're going to go to Runeterra. So, you might see some familiar faces. Annie is Noxian, Aurelian Soul is Targonian, Alistar. Now, there's an interesting consideration. Alistar is likely to be a Runeterran champion, I think. Now, what is Alistar going to do? I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you. His big theme in League of Legends is that he breaks CC abilities. CC is just crowd control, and it's like stuns, silences. He isn't affected by that when he ultimates. So I don't know how to translate that into Legends of Runeterra. It's kind of a tricky thing to do. We do have stuns, we do have silences, but they're not really relevant except in niche scenarios. And we have a way to do it already through Mikhail's Blessing, and like that's not a card that's played whatsoever. So Alistar is definitely a prime candidate, but there is no current foundation for his card base in Legends of Runeterra. There's no Minotaur. There's a couple Minotaurs, actually. We have the Reckoners. Three of them. There's three of them. I know you've never seen the one, but it gets buffed every time you play a spell on it. I don't remember its name, though. Anyways, they don't have a tag at the moment, so they're not a race or a class or anything like that you can write into the search bar and pull up. So he'll probably come down the line if he does. Brand, another excellent option for Runeterran champion, could also be in Freljord. I think he is still from there canonically. It's been a while since I kept up with the LOR lore, or the League of Legends lore, but Brand is basically a giant fire spirit. I'll just move myself down here. Maybe make myself a little bit bigger. Who inhabited the body of this guy, and he wants to burn the world. Definitely a prime candidate for Runeterran champions. Again, not really a foundation for his current card pool. Fiddlesticks could go into either Demacia or be a Runeterran. Tough to say where he fits in. I think now the story is that he is from Demacia, or roams the outsides of Demacia or something like that. But he's a demon at this point. The real demon that I expect to come into the game, though, is Shaco. I fully expect Shaco to bring some new kind of trap into the game, likely with a full set of cards alongside that, and we'll see if that comes in the near future or if it's going to be a while down the line. But Shaco is a candidate that I'm almost certain will be Runeterran. He doesn't have a lot of lore right now, so a good way for them to expand his lore would be to bring him into Legends of Runeterra, right? Look at some of these early concept drawings. This is definitely a great way to build his background, because there isn't a lot to him right now. They kind of axed all his lore a little while ago, and they never got around to redoing it. So Legends of Runeterra being the lore game, it makes a lot of sense for Shaco to exist as a Runeterran champion, and for them to bring him in and update his foundations. Now, the next batch of champions that I want to talk about as potentially being Runeterrans in the future are the Void champions. We've seen some of these champions already. Rek'Sai, of course, is in Shurima, but that's where she is canonically. It's her area. Kai'Sa, also Shurima. That's where she fell into the Void. But the rest of these, kind of unlocked. Now, Vel'Koz, I believe, still has some things to do with the Freljord, but he also wants to just see everything in Legends of Runeterra and see everything in the world of Runeterra. And that it could make some sense for him to be a Runeterran champion. Kog'Maw, again, wanders the world just looking for things to eat. Same thing with Cho'Gath. And even Kha'Zix. All of these Void champions could potentially be Runeterrans. Bel'Veth as well. I don't know a whole lot about her. She's still relatively new to League, and I've stopped playing that game a while ago, but she could make sense as a Runeterran champion. Now, Malzahar, I would fully expect to be in Shurima, because that's kind of where he's at. That's where he's always been at. But then there's a couple other options for Runeterrans as well, namely these two right here, Blitzcrank and Mundo. Now, they're obviously Zonites, right? They're pretty heavily tied to Zon at this point, but Mundo goes where he pleases. That's Mundo, right? That's Mundo's famous line. So you can't tell Mundo what to do. he'll go where he wants. It makes sense for him to be Runeterran purely based off of that alone. And Blitzcrank, I believe, before his lore was redone, he was just a golem that walked around Runeterra. He was built by Zonites, but he wasn't necessarily located in Zon. So it could make sense for them to bring that aspect back and push him out that way. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. Who do you think the next Runeterran champion will be? Do you think that my ideas have any merit? Let me know in the comments below. And if you made it this far, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.